Ever feel like business success is all about chasing those big revenue numbers? Got to hit those targets, got to keep growing.
It's easy to get caught up in that race.
Exactly. But today, we're diving into a book that flips that idea on its head. Cash is King by Kingma. Get ready to hear about the unsung hero of the business world, cash.
Absolutely. Kingma reminds us that even a company swimming in profits, hitting those revenue targets you mentioned,
Right, crushing it on paper.
can still hit a wall without solid cash management. It's the lifeblood, the fuel, the key to weathering any storm.
It's like the foundation of everything else, but it's easy to overlook. Now, Kingma talks about building a cash culture.
I can see where you're going with this.
Yeah, and I'll admit, at first it sounds a little, corporate jargony.
A bit formal, yeah.
But then Kingma throws in these stories, like the
Yeah.
one about Bob and his company Owens, and suddenly it all clicks.
Bob's journey is almost like a cautionary tale, isn't it? This successful entrepreneur, riding high on impressive revenue growth,
Everyone thinks he's got it made.
suddenly realizes, wait a minute, my cash reserves are drying up.
It's like he's throwing this amazing party, everyone's having a blast, but in the back of his mind, he's got his eye on an empty bank account.
A classic entrepreneur trap. So relatable.
And that's where Kingma takes us deeper into the fascinating world of working capital, because it's not just about the revenue, right? It's about what you can actually do with it.
Exactly. And he does it through these almost comical interactions Bob has with his team, really highlighting a problem a lot of companies face, departmental silos.
Everyone's in their own lane.
Just like at Owens, you have these departments so focused on their own goals, their own metrics, that the big picture of cash flow gets lost in the shuffle.
So it's like that saying, robbing Peter to pay Paul, but on a company-wide scale.
Exactly. Kingma lays out how this plays out in a really practical way, like in sales, for example. Imagine a sales team laser-focused on closing a massive deal, everyone's celebrating, high fives all around,
Campaign poppin'.
until you realize the client negotiated a 90-day payment term.
Ouch. Great for sales figures on paper, but in those 90 days, bills still need to be paid.
Exactly, and that's where the disconnect happens.
So how does a delay like that, even if it's for a big win, affect the rest of the business?
It creates this ripple effect, impacting everything from making payroll to being able to order supplies for new projects. Suddenly, that big win puts a strain on the entire company.
So what's the antidote? Do you just tell the sales team to cool it on the big deals?
Not necessarily. It's not about pumping the brakes on growth. It's about strategic thinking. Maybe you negotiate a shorter payment term. Maybe you offer a discount for early payment.
Creative with it.
The key is to consider the cash implications up front, not just the allure of a big number on a contract.
It's about understanding the cost of that cash, right? Because time really is money in this case.
Precisely. And that's the heart of a cash culture. It's about embedding this awareness, this understanding into the company's DNA.
So everyone's speaking the same language when it comes to cash.
Exactly. Everyone understands their decisions impact the big picture of cash flow.
And that brings us to another area where Kingma really dives deep, inventory. He spent a good chunk of the book on it, and I'll admit, at first I thought, okay, how exciting can inventory be? But then he had me hooked at this one analogy.
I know what you're going to say, the boat analogy.
Yes, he compares a business with poorly managed inventory to a boat where everyone's rowing in different directions.
It's such a powerful visual.
You've got all these departments, each one like an oar, and if they're not pulling together, you're not going anywhere fast. And Kingma is saying that's exactly what happens to cash flow when inventory is mismanaged.
It's one of those aha moments in the book, for sure. And Kingma doesn't just point out the problem with the boat analogy, he goes deeper. He breaks down different types of inventory, 5 to be exact.
5. Okay, now I'm starting to feel like I need a whiteboard to keep track of all this.
Don't worry, we won't go full accounting lecture here.
Okay, good.
But understanding these categories, even briefly, is really key to seeing how they impact cash.
Okay, I'm with you. Lay it on me.
All right, so you've got your cycle stock, which is basically what you need to meet that day-to-day demand. Then there's safety stock, which is kind of like your insurance against the unexpected, things like unexpected orders or supplier delays.
Okay, yeah. So you're not caught off guard, you've got a little cushion.
Right, exactly. And then you've got your in-transit stock. Pretty self-explanatory. It's stuff that's literally on the truck as we speak.
Makes sense.
Huh?
Okay, so what about the other two?
Right, so then there's pre-build stock. Companies use this to prepare for those predictable spikes in demand.
Like the holidays or Black Friday, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Seasonal spikes, or even planned factory shutdowns. That way they can stay ahead of the game. And finally, there's merchandise stock, which is specific to retail. So that's your finished product, ready to be sold, sitting on shelves.
Okay, got it. So 5 types of inventory. But how do they all tie back to that boat analogy? Where does the whole rowing in different directions come in?
It boils down to this: miscalculations in any of these 5 areas, and that's where your cash gets tied up unnecessarily. It's like one oar pulling too hard while another's barely touching the water.
You're really killing it with this boat analogy.
Well, Kingma really lays it out there. He uses safety stock as an example. It's crucial, but too much of it, well, that's cash that could be used elsewhere, right?
And assets.
Exactly. And then he urges businesses to find that sweet spot. Enough safety stock for protection, but also efficient use of cash. It's all about balance.
So it's finding the right balance, making sure every department understands their impact, how their decisions affect the overall inventory, and in turn, the company's cash.
Absolutely. And to help solve this, King McNama introduces a process called SNOP.
SNOP, that rings a bell. Isn't that where the story of Caesar comes in?
Yeah.
He was the plant manager at Owens, if I'm remembering correctly.
You got it. Caesar inherits this massive inventory headache, but he uses SNOP to wrangle it in. And more importantly, he uses it to get everyone on the same page.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, it's all about aligning those sales forecasts with the production schedules and then the procurement strategies.
So it's like having that coxswain in the boat, calling out the strokes, making sure everyone's rowing in sync.
Precisely. It's about communication, collaboration, and everyone understanding how their department impacts the bigger picture, how it all affects cash flow. And ultimately, that's how companies can avoid those cash-draining inventory nightmares.
Now, I know Kingma's big on metrics, and cash is king is full of them. But for someone like me, and I'm guessing a lot of our listeners, too many numbers can be overwhelming.
It's easy to get lost in the weeds.
Help us cut through the noise here. What are the crucial numbers to watch, and what are they actually telling us about the business?
Yeah.
It feels like we're talking about finding a signal in the noise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
And it's perfect because that's where Kingma introduces Annette. She's the plant controller at Owens, right? And she has a knack for zeroing in on the important metrics.
She really cuts through the clutter. And that's so important, especially when we're talking about something as crucial as cash flow.
Totally. So how does Annette help us navigate this sea of numbers? I mean, Kingma throws a lot at us.
Well, Annette is a great example of why it's so important to have someone who doesn't just crunch the numbers, but can actually translate them into, insights, things you can actually use.
Yeah, you don't want just data. You want information that's actually helpful.
Exactly. Kingma shows us that it's not enough to just look at the numbers themselves. You've got to understand the why, the story behind them. What are they telling us about the health of the company's cash flow?
So it's like she's a financial detective.
Yeah.
Using these clues to piece together the big picture.
I like that, yeah. And one of the things that she highlights is that sometimes a seemingly negative change in a metric like net working capital.
Hold on. How can less working capital be a good thing?
I know, it seems counterintuitive, right?
It really does.
It's all about context. So Kingma actually brings Caesar back as an example. Remember how he inherited that epic inventory mess?
Oh, yeah. Poor Caesar. Thrown right into the fire.
Right. So as he starts implementing those SNOP strategies that we talked about, they actually start getting much better at using their existing inventory. They're becoming more efficient.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
So that efficiency might initially mean that they're not holding as much inventory, which on paper could make their working capital go down a little bit in the short term.
So it's like they're trimming the fat, becoming leaner, even if the numbers take a minute to catch up.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. It's a perfect example of how sometimes a deeper dive into the numbers, combined with a real understanding of the processes behind them, reveals a much more accurate picture of the company's health.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting to me. Because it really highlights how important it is to look beyond just the surface. It's not just about what the numbers are, but why they are that way.
And that's where someone like Annette thrives. She's not just a number cruncher, she's a strategic thinker who can really connect those dots and explain what they mean for the long-term health of the business.
So she's like the voice of reason in this world of data overload.
Exactly. And speaking of the bigger picture, Kingma doesn't just stop at the numbers, right? He also talks about how effective cash management isn't just about survival. It's about setting your business up to thrive in any market, no matter what gets thrown your way.
He's talking about resilience, isn't he?
Yes. That ability to weather the storms and even better, seize opportunities when they come up.
It's about being ready for anything. And he contrasts companies like Netflix and Blockbuster to really hit this point home.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example. Everyone understands that.
Right. Netflix, with their ability to pivot from DVDs to streaming, versus Blockbuster, who, well, we all know what happened there.
It didn't go so well.
It's a stark reminder of how critical it is to have that financial flexibility, that cash cushion, to make those moves when the market demands it.
100%. Because if you don't have that flexibility, if you're not managing your cash well, you might miss out on those game-changing opportunities.
And Kingma ties us all back to that idea of a cash culture, doesn't he? It's like he's bringing it full circle.
Exactly. He's saying it's not just about having one person like Annette who gets it. It's about instilling this mindset, this awareness across the entire organization.
So that everyone feels that ownership.
Right. Everyone's thinking about the impact of their decisions on the company's financial health. It's not just reacting when a crisis hits, but proactively building that resilience from day one.
It's about weaving it into the very fabric of the company.
That's a great way to put it. It's like this underlying current that's always there, guiding your decisions and driving you towards success.
You know, it makes Cash is King sound less like a dry finance book and more like a strategic guide for navigating an unpredictable world.
I love that, because it really is. It's about understanding that cash flow is like the engine. It's what powers every decision, every opportunity, every challenge that your business faces.
It's the fuel that keeps you moving. So for our listeners who are taking this all in and maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, what would you say is the most important message King Warmo wants us to remember?
It goes back to that simple but powerful phrase, cash is king. And that's not just a catchy title, it's the truth.
It's the foundation.
Whether you're running a multinational corporation, a small business, or even just managing your own personal finances, understanding and managing that cash flow is absolutely essential.
It's about being proactive, asking the right questions, and always considering how your choices impact not just your profits, but your cash.
Because at the end of the day, you can have the best product, the best team, the best intentions in the world.
But without that solid cash foundation,
you're building on shaky ground.
And on that note, we'll leave our listeners with this final thought. In a world obsessed with chasing those big revenue numbers, never underestimate the power of understanding, managing, and yes, even respecting the power of cash.